Hello there. Good evening, good afternoon, good day, good night, goodbye. No, not goodbye. Hello, and welcome to another streaming session with me, Scott Claus. I'm going to be talking about 2D animation today. That's the focus of today's discussion. I am a former animation person, 2D animation and 3D animation. I worked for some pretty big studios. Disney, DreamWorks, Rhythm and Hughes. Worked on some really interesting projects over the years. And currently I am an instructor. I teach animation at different schools. And one of them is CG Spectrum. And we have a 2D animation program at CG Spectrum, and a lot of great classes there. And so if you're interested in 2D animation, you may want to check out the classes. We also have other classes at CG Spectrum. You might be interested in those as well. So we have a website, cgspectrum.com, and then other streams that happen where we show off some of the things that happen at the school as well. So feel free to check them out at your leisure. And welcome to the stream. Please feel free to chime in at any point if you have something to say, if you want to chime in on the chat. Always appreciate your questions, comments, and anything you guys like to talk to about with each other too as well. So first up, hey Sherry, nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Hey Drawn Skull, did you see the new Tom and Jerry trailer? What do I think of it? I think I'm supposedly working on it. I checked out imdb.com, and apparently I am working on Tom and Jerry's new movie. I think they may have goofed because I worked on Tom and Jerry's original movie back in the 1990s, whenever that was, and got a credit on that one. But I'm not currently working on this Tom and Jerry movie. As far as I could tell, it looked cool. It looked fun. What do you think? What did you think of it? Yeah, I haven't heard a whole lot about it. I've just heard that some people who are very enthusiastic about Tom and Jerry are very excited about it. So I'm just going to be honest. I wasn't a huge fan of the movie we made in the 90s. I didn't have a lot to do with that film. I just did a small little section of it. Or the studio I worked for did a small section of the film from the 90s. And we all checked out at the minute they both looked at each other and went, "Hi, let's be friends and we can talk now." So anyway, so yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Tom and Jerry myself. I like them, but I didn't grow up with them that much. So I'd be curious to see what other people think of Tom and Jerry. Some of these characters are getting kind of older, I guess, and it's interesting to see them coming back. Bugs Bunny and Friends. Do they move into the new millennial years, or do they get left behind with time? Like some others, like the Mighty Mouse and I don't know, Dippy Dog, whatever. Anyway, I think it's going to be pretty fun from what you saw in the teaser. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I could see it looked pretty cool. So interesting. And as far as I know, animation is still doing pretty well, despite the lockdown situation in most countries. I know that The Croods is coming out either, I think, today, maybe, or tomorrow. Anyway, it's a Thanksgiving film, and Trolls, the sequel, that did pretty well. So yeah, hopefully people are supporting stuff. You guys have heard me. Anyone who's come back to listen for more knows I always say support things that you like. You will see more of it if you do. So yeah, cool. I'll have to check it out. I'll check out the Tom and Jerry trailer as soon as we're done here today. So again, I brought my friend. If you've ever visited one of my streams before, maybe you recognize my friend here. And I'm just going to be introducing the project that I'm working on today while we're talking animation. So let's just hide this for a second. And you saw a trailer for new live action Clifford the Big Red Dog movie. Now, why would they want to make a live action Clifford movie? I guess CG live action hybrid. Hey, why not? Whatever. But boy, if there's anything that lent itself well to 2D, it would probably be Clifford. But it's all good. I like it all. So I'm going to be working on my wizard thing today again. Some of you may remember I've been working on this thing for a while now. I'm about finished with it, so I thought I'd spend one more day on it. Next time you see it, it'll probably be done. But one last week of working on this thing before I send it off into the ether. So again, I used Mickey as a inspiration, and then Avatar from the film Wizards by Bakshi, and then just sort of mashed it up and made it into my own thing. And then also was using this animation that I'd started many years ago, and then kind of rebooted it recently. Some weeks ago now. I've been working on this off and on in streams, and then the last time we saw it, the rough animation looked like this. I'll just let that play for a minute while I talk about other things. Again, yeah, I don't know about Clifford Big Red Dog. I hadn't heard of it, so that's interesting. I know when I was at Rhythm and Hues, we were working on Marmaduke, and I didn't see it. I didn't work on it, so I don't know too much about it. But it's interesting. It's interesting when they're trying to do live action animation hybrids where they make it look as if the character is in the real world. I don't know if that's what Clifford's all about, but obviously people want to talk about The Lion King. Oh, is it a good idea to take what was a 2D animated cartoon and turn it into a CG animated, realistic environment looking world where it kind of gets into the uncanny valley? I try to stay away from making judgment calls. There's always somebody out there who says it's the greatest thing since sliced cheese, the best thing that they've ever seen. And I don't, have any interest in dampening anybody's spirits. I like a lot of movies that are really rotten. I love a lot of rotten movies. And I mean, I love them legitimately, and I'm not going to list them because I don't want to humiliate myself and lose viewers on my stream. I'm just kidding. I don't care what anyone thinks, but no, it's outside the realm of this. Okay, press me and I'll tell you some really rotten movies that I actually love and watch regularly. But, if people like it, they like it. And growing up, a lot of people criticize my musical tastes. Same thing. I'm not going to tell you what they are. But eventually I began to realize it's like you like what you like. And whether it's because it hit you when you were a kid or because it's legitimately good but just wasn't successful, whatever. So people like what they like. So I'm reluctant to say, ooh, new Lion King bad. A lot of great artists worked on it. A lot of people gave their all to it, and it did really well financially. So what you're going to do? Give it another 20 years, and we'll see if they're still talking about live action-ish Lion King or the original or either. And we'll see. We'll see who the winner is. But yeah, John Skull. You've got. I think movie theaters are going to die because they put Blockbuster on streaming. Yeah, well, that's been in the works for a long time. I'll just let this play for a little bit. You guys can look at what I've been doing with it. Once I got my first streaming channel, I don't know when that was, but it was quite a while ago now. It's just like, whoa, this is really cool. This is really awesome. And I think I'm kind of gotten a little too old for movie theaters. I get tired of having to deal with other people. I know that sounds awful, but it's also really fun to see something where you're with an audience and they can really, like a comedy and everybody's laughing and it gets you involved. And I still think you need to go see old movies on the big screen, which is how they were meant to be screened in the first place. So I would hope that theaters won't go away. I know there have been retrospective theaters, like in Los Angeles, there are a few of them, or there used to be more. And it's like the only way you can see 2001: Space Odyssey the way it was meant to be seen. And it does make a difference, or even more recently, superhero films. Are they ever going to feel like they did when you saw it in a theater? In the best home theater situation, it doesn't quite feel the same to me anyway. So I hope it's not, I hope it's not a matter of like they did with 2D and CG animation where it's like, well, it's got to be one or the other. We either have theaters or we don't. It's like, no, both. It's still money to be made. People still love going to the theater. They just put a new one up in my neighborhood. It hasn't opened yet because of what's going on out there, but they do intend to have another multiplex theater in my hood. So anyway, yeah. So my stance on it is I hope that things don't feel like they have to be either or with streaming and theaters. As long as people are still interested, as long as people like you guys go out and spend money on tickets at theaters, they'll keep putting movies into theaters. So if you like something, support it financially rather than just streaming something that you see and that you can get for free. Spend a little cash on it. And that will tell whoever's making these that you want more of that and that you're willing to pay for it. It's all too easy nowadays to just grab stuff online and get it for free. And I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. We all do it. But if you see an opportunity to support something financially that you're really into, it will pay off and you'll get more of it. There, that's my soapbox speech for the day. Classic and 87, welcome back. Hey, hello everybody. How's your week going? Hope you're doing well. So I'm working on a wizard, and like I said, I've shown this one before. I'm almost wrapped up on it, so I thought I'd spend one more week on it. The state it's in right now, I'll play it. I've cleaned up a lot of frames, but not all of them. So I'm just going to continue cleaning this up and hopefully finish up with this. Probably not tonight, but next time you see it, if you tune in, this should be done. I promise that, and then I don't deliver. Now, next time I show this thing, it will probably be done, whether it's next week or not. Next week, I'm actually going to have a little Santa Claus friend show up because it's officially December for next week. So I figure it's I've held it off long enough. I know some people are already doing lights and things. Those are people who care about that sort of thing. Anyway, so yes, I'm just going to continue finishing up with this. I'm doing the cleanup pass, and I will talk about the cleanup pass a little bit as I go. But please feel free to chime in with any topics of conversation you are interested in, and I'm always eager to drop everything for something that's a fun topic of conversation or things that you guys are interested in discussing. Like I said, I can talk about anything, industry stuff, how do I get a job stuff, how do I prepare my work so I can get a job stuff, anything you guys are into. I'm happy to oblige as long as it's civilized and cool and fun for everybody. Classics, doing good. Just finished your animation today. Okay, so the question is, if you finished your animation today, what are you going to do now? Are you going to post it? Or have you posted it already? Or are you going to put it somewhere where you can all see it and start making a name for yourself? Or maybe you already have a platform where you can do that. But you don't have to post it anywhere, frankly. You can just do whatever you want with it. For years, I did animation, didn't show it to anyone. But hopefully you've done something you can be proud of and you're going to share it with somebody. Or maybe you did it for a class too. That's always legit. But anyway, congratulations. Glad you finished your animation. That's awesome news. Those of us who finish animation will tell you it's not that easy, that it takes a long time. That's why, again, I'm working on this wizard. I've been on it for quite a while now. And I've been doing other scenes in between, so I just take a little break every now and then from it. But I'm closing in on the end of it now. But yeah, it takes a while. So congratulations, good job. Finishing something is really exciting. It's really important. It's important that you finish the things that you start. Sometimes it's more important than that. It's more important that you finish than that it actually be good. Because if you finish one thing, you can go on and finish something else. And we're not really designed, we meaning people, assuming everyone who's watching this is human and not an alien life form or some form of cybertronics. Anyway, we're not really designed to finish stuff. We're really good at starting things, but physically, we're not designed to finish stuff off. We just don't roll that way too often. So you got to work at it. You got to work hard to finish things. And I'm always very excited when people tell me that they finished something, even if it didn't end up exactly how they hoped it would. So good job. Congratulations. And Drawn Skull. You're still going to accomplish your dreams of becoming a filmmaker and animator. Well, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. And that's great if you did a horror script. I still feel, and I think we've talked about this a lot in the past, but in case anyone hasn't heard my opinion on this subject, I still feel that horror films are a great way to get into the business of writing, directing, making movies, visual effects, anything. There's just something about the DIY factor that you get with horror films that you don't get it with other films. Nowadays, I am seeing more and more people who can do their own effects and selling their project by doing their own effects. There's these guys who did the movie called The Endless, and then they did Spring, and did them with micro budgets, and they're on, I think, Amazon Prime. You can get them. And so now they're sort of a little more legit. Their last film had celebrities in it, and they just did it themselves. And I just think it's wonderful. But horror films are still a way for people to get involved in making films that actually have a chance of getting seen. I saw something really clever not too long ago. It was, I don't know, a year or two ago. It was Halloween at Christmas. So Michael Myers, a Christmas like episode slasher thing that was done for no money. And I don't know how they got away with it without getting sued or whatever, but it was just sort of a fan film they made with Michael Myers attacking, he's the Halloween guy, attacking at Christmas. And I watched it. I thought, oh, that's a really cool idea. That's really funny. Or not funny, but I mean, it's interesting. And so horror films, it proves to me, it's like I'm still interested in horror films even when they don't have budgets. There's something very visceral about horror films that doesn't have to be a billion-dollar production. In fact, sometimes that seems to hurt it. And so, yeah, good for you for writing some horror stuff. So might as well. And I heard actually that they're putting together another Silent Hill film, potentially by the original director. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I know some people really detest those films, but I thought they were fun. I'm not, I don't need to have the story that I used to need to have when I was younger. It's like, oh, the story's got to be really cool. Now I'm just like, if it's got cool visuals and it isn't completely boring, I'm in. I'll watch it. And that goes for a lot of animated films as well. So, I think there are a lot of people out there who are really determined that, oh, the story is the most important thing, and you gotta do something new and innovative. It's like, well, I've seen everything. Now I just like to be jolted into something visually exciting these days. So anyway, yeah, so I think it's John Skull, the Halloween Christmas thing. I think it's on YouTube. I think you can just type in Halloween, Michael Myers Christmas, something like that. To be honest, I believe the way I found out about it was the Cinema Snob. So I follow the Cinema Snob, an online reviewer. Yeah, I think he's really funny, Brad something or other. And so I think that's where I heard about it. Anyway, it's not really good. I mean, it's not like an actual film. It is exactly what you'd expect from a fan film. But for a fan film, it's actually pretty interesting. So, yeah, if you're interested, and I think John Scully, I think you said that you're interested in the franchise situation. Yeah, it might be fun to check it out and see if you could maybe do something better. That's one of the things I always loved about DIY filmmaking was it made me think, oh, I could do something like that. I could actually do something better than that, given half the chance. Maybe I'll go out and I'll try. So anything that spurs you into wanting to do more. Some people it's competition. Some people it's just you got something to say and you have to say it. But whatever it is that spurs you on to create or makes people want to create things, it's all good. It's especially good if you find, like Stephen King always said about his work, that your obsessions turn into money. So just imagine being the person who had an idea that everybody suddenly goes, oh wow, that's perfectly timed, that's exactly what we wanted to see. Well, as I always say, got to stop dropping his name, but my friend who did Lucas the Spider, that was what happened with him. It just picked up. Everybody wanted to see that, and he made a whole bunch of them, and they were all popular, and now he's going to do his own show, and I just think it's awesome. I'm glad to say that I knew him when, because he's a real good guy, and it couldn't happen to somebody nicer. Well, except it could happen to everybody out there watching right now, and then I could really say it couldn't happen to anybody who's nicer, even though I don't really know who you guys are. So anyway, Yeah. So, still in shock with The Rock being your cousin. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Why, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, so we're still trying to figure out how you can work that. Oh, I don't know. Well, yeah, maybe you can. So I'm going to leave that one alone. Come back and tell us when you worked it and tell us how you did it, and then I'll talk about it. All right. Thanks. Daffy Duck walk animation still needs finished Red Riding Hood from Texas to get that dance sequence down. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not gonna mince words. Why should I? I had heard for years about the Little Red. What is it? Not Red Riding Hood. It's anyway, but you know what I'm talking about. The Tex Avery Red Riding Hood sequence, and she's dancing and everything. And it's like I like it. I think it's fun, but it never. It didn't impress me as much as I thought it would. By the time I saw it, we'd already had Jessica Rabbit, which another one I wasn't that impressed with. I liked it. I thought the idea of it was good, the character, but the execution of it with the whole one, you know, the big Veronica Lake thing with one eye being covered and then those weird proportions of her body and everything. It just, I don't know. I'm still waiting for someone to do something that's, I'm trying to wash my mouth here, but it's something that's like that, but a little more solid. And I just didn't think Little Red Riding Hood. So in other words, I have my my challenge to you. This is for Classics AM 87. What if you could do the dance sequence from Red Riding Hood? What if you could improve it? I think it could be improved. So there's a challenge for you. See what you can do, or maybe you can just copy it. That's enough for one person to do. But I feel like it can be improved. My thing was always trying to do characters that looked a little bit more like the Don Bluth, like the Princess Daphne thing. I don't know if you guys even know what that is, but I was determined to try and flesh that character out a little bit more and make more animation. And that's John Pomeroy, I believe, and I got to meet him, and I was just in awe because I was such a big Don Bluth fan, a Dragonslayer fan, and when I met him, I'm like, as far as I know, he was kind of responsible for Princess Daphne, and I was a big fan of that character. So anyway, so I'm still thinking about doing something like that, and watch this space. One of these days, maybe I'll have something. I just know nowadays, I don't know, changing tastes and changing mores, whatever. I don't know if people would think that Princess Daphne is appropriate for this Twitch stream. So anyway, just a thought. But Ryan and Jerry want me to get him on the stream. Oh yeah. Well, hey, you know, come on. What's the good of having somebody who's famous in the family if you can't get them to help out? Right. That's funny. I wonder what that would do to our streams if all of a sudden we said, oh, by the way, we're going to have The Rock on. I have a funny feeling that if The Rock came on, he could talk about baking bread, and it would probably be the highest rated streams we've ever had for the channel, just because of who he is. So, well, make it happen. No, but that is funny. And yeah, it remains to be seen how that will work out. Yeah, well, if you like a challenge, Classics AM, go for it. I was going to try and do stuff like that before I got really busy with other things. So I don't really have the time to do animation challenges anymore. I would love to. I just think it's such a good idea. I love it when websites and things have weekly challenges and they say, okay, now you're going to animate this and that. I think that's a really good motivator to get you to keep pushing yourself. But the way that my time is parsed up right now, I just simply don't have the time for any of that. So anything, again, that gets you motivated and gets you out there pushing yourself to go work a little bit harder, it's got to be a good thing. You know, as long as you're not wasting your time and energies on something that could be spent doing something else. For example, if you are really desperate to get a job, at some point you just have to get a job, and So I go on and on a lot about, well, do what you love and love what you do, but there's also this thing called paying your way and making sure that you can take care of what has to be taken care of. I always, when I was working, I always had side projects. When I was working in the studios, working at Disney, etc., I always had side projects going. I had a question come up recently. Somebody said, "Hey, what if I'm working on a project? Does that at a studio? Does that mean that Disney or someone can take it?" And it's like, well, they didn't know I was working on these projects, and had anybody been interested in them, I would have said, well, I didn't do them at the studio. I didn't do them according to that. Again, the studios are not in the business of trying to steal from people. And so generally speaking, they don't want to see your projects unless you're officially presenting them as something that they could potentially purchase. And I learned that at DreamWorks when they were actually interested in soliciting projects from us. And I even got paid to do a couple things there. Nothing ever came of them, but nothing noteworthy anyway. But you know, when a studio wants your stuff, they'll pay you for it. It's not, they're not generally in the business. I've heard stories of people who got their work stolen. I can't corroborate any of those stories, but I heard some stuff. I'm not going to mention when and where, but pretty legit stories of people who said that was my project and they took it. And I don't know. I mean, in the moment when those people told me these things, I'm like, well, you make a good case. I can see where that may have happened. But my experience has been, if a studio wants you, they'll pay for you because they want you to deliver more. If they like what you've done, then odds are they think that you can make money for the studio, and so they will hire you to do more stuff. That's kind of the thinking anyway. So why would they steal one project from you when they could get plenty of projects from you if they just hire you to do stuff? So that's been my experience more often than not, is studios are always looking out for the next hotshot, the next person who's got some property, IP, script, whatever. And then once they do, then it's like, oh, no, we'll pay you. In fact, we'll pay a lot of money if you'll give your exclusive rights to your projects to us. And think about J.K. Rowling and friends like that. They didn't get rich. I mean, I don't know how rich they are, but they didn't get rich by having their work stolen. They got rich because they worked for the studios. So anyway, so get in contact with them. Well, that's nice of you, John Skull. We'll see. Why don't we have The Rock come in and talk about 2D animation and his experiences with that? And why not? So, but yeah, no, I mean, certainly he'd be a good one to talk to about effects animation. I'm trying to think if I ever, how many degrees of separation I am from that. They were working on the Fast and Furious movies at the studio I was at. I think that was him, correct? Listen to me, I'm so out of it. They were working on those films when I was at Rhythm and Hughes throughout the 2000s up until 2013. I was there, so it was certainly being worked on at the time, but I did not personally work on them myself. So, any tips for a hand-drawn animator like yourself? Do I have any tips? I got some great advice. This is for Drawn Skull. Classics AM87. I had got some great advice when I was first starting out in the animation business. I got my first official job. I was picking up work from someone who was an experienced veteran, and she was really cool. And I ended up working for her later at Disney on, I won't say what, but on movies. And she was really cynical and fun, and I liked her a lot. And so I said that very same question to her. I must have been, I don't know, early 20s anyway. I said, any advice? And she looked me right in the eye and she said, quit now. Run, screaming as fast and far away as you can. Well, obviously, I didn't do that. And what she was really trying to say to me is if you're not serious about this, if you're just casually interested in it, you may want to mosey along. But if you really are serious about it, then here are some thoughts. And then she proceeded to kind of help me out with some tips. So I guess the question is what kind of tips are you looking for? Are you looking for artistic tips, or are you looking for career advice? Or so what is it exactly that you think that you might need some tips with? Because there are lots and lots of different facets to being a 2D animator, and the artistic side of them is one of them, but there are other things as well. So if you're just looking for artistic tips, that's one thing. If you're looking for other stuff, that's another thing too. So yeah, curious. There are so many things that I wish I would have known when I was getting started. So that's one of the reasons I like doing these streams, is when people ask me, you know, little things about career advice, or even just making short films and that lot. You know, there are all sorts of comments I have on the subject. So one of the things that I always recommend is that if you are interested in being an animator, that you animate. There's never been a better time for technology so that you can do stuff by yourself. When I was young, back during the Punic Wars, there was not a lot of technology available for us to be able to do animation. It was expensive. It was more time consuming than it is now. It's just before the digital age, it was really prohibitive to do animation. And guess what? A lot of us did it anyway. And what that tells you is if you really love something, you're going to do it no matter what people tell you. And I cannot tell you how many people have told me, oh, you can't do animation, or you won't do animation. And in my career, you know, people who I worked with, and I'd say, I really want to be an animator. And they'd say, oh, no, you don't have it, or you're not going to make it, or whatever. And had I listened to them, I wouldn't have had the long and wonderful career that I did have. I mean, I still have a career. It's just I'm not in production anymore. But many times I'd have people tell me, oh, just give up. It's not worth it. You know, you're never going to go anywhere or do anything. And not because I wasn't talented, but just simply it's like, oh, well, the business doesn't support, you know, that, or, you know, there's no work right now, or they don't make the kinds of things that you're good at, or you know, just any number of reasons. People, I don't think they mean any harm, but they'll tell you, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I'm living proof. I did everything I ever wanted to do in the business. So you can do all sorts of things. So first and foremost, any tips for a hand-drawn animator like yourself? If it's something you're interested in doing, just keep doing it, and don't let anybody tell you you can't. Like I always say, you have to pay the rent. You have to keep your life up. Nothing, not even animation, in my humble opinion anyway, is worth sacrificing everything for. At a certain point, you have to make some decisions and go, well, in order to finish this film, I'm going to have to X. I'm going to have to spend a lot of money, or I'm going to have to put off my loved ones who are asking, why can't I come to, I don't know, Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. You know, and then you say, well, because I'm working on my film, and my film is more important right now than those things. And so you have to make calls like that, and that helps you decide how much you're into it for. And when you're sacrificing everything for your art, you are most certainly an artist at heart, and you proceed from there. In other words, nobody could stop you, even if you wanted them to stop you. So for example, when I made my first short film, I was in college, and every weekend I'd be at the studio in this little late 80s. I'd be at the studio and I'd be working on my short film, and all my friends were off playing and doing other things. Now, granted, I didn't really have a lot of other things I wanted to do, but I really did want to do my short film more than anything. And if I wasn't drawing for my short film, I was in the editing bay practicing my editing skills, which, by the way, were done on a 3/4 machine videotape. But hey, it was better than VHS, which is all I had before that. So every waking minute I had, within reason, I would be in either the editing studio or the animation studio such as we had one in my college, and working on my projects and trying to get better and better and trying to finish my stuff so that I could hold them up above my head and say, see, I did this. Won't you please hire me to do this professionally, because I really love it and I want to do it all day long. And that's kind of how it worked out. That's kind of what happened, is I ended up doing exactly what I love doing all the time anyway. Granted, I was doing it for other people and their projects and not my own projects, but I did my projects on the side. I am almost amazed, not to be self-congratulatory, but I don't even know where I got the energy to do projects of my own on my free time while I was working in overtime situations in studios. And then the answer is I had no life. I had very few friends and I didn't do too much. And I just worked a lot, whether it was on my own stuff or for other people. So anyway, there you go. So let's see. Inner hollow, TGH. The lack of ability to draw holds you back from making better at animation. Really heavily on reference. And then it feels like you won't ever get to a stage of creating your own art. Well, but let me put this one to you just for that. Well, you got more to say. Truly your passion, but fear of not getting better makes it doubt. This for you. Do you ever get the feeling? Yes. So for inner hollow, TGH, that's an excellent question. Thank you for setting me up for that one. I'll be perfectly honest. I was not the best animator when I was starting off in my career. I didn't draw that well. I'm still not convinced that I'm an incredible drafts person. I think I'm very happy with what I can do, and I really enjoy it, and I don't need to do it any other way. But when I look at the design styles of some of my students, I just am in shock, because they're so talented and they're young and they don't have a lot of experience, and they've just got it, whatever it is. That being said, the best drawings in the world won't hide a lack of an understanding of emotion. And so what happened is eventually, I mean, I excelled at 2D animation. I'm not going to downgrade myself from that. I think that I made quite a name for myself, and a lot of people were very happy with my work, and I got paid well and got to choose which projects I wanted to be on, so I had a measure of respect as an 2D animation person. But when I went into CG animation, all of a sudden I took off. And that's what led me to doing, and not so much in character, but in creature effects. It seemed like I kind of found my home. And what I liked about it is I didn't have to draw all the time, which, I missed drawing for myself when I was doing 2D for a living. I stopped drawing for myself. It was what I was doing all day, and so why would I want to do that with my off time? And that should have told me something right there, is if you're thinking that, maybe it's not for you. So I didn't feel like I ever really excelled at 2D animation, and when CG animation came along, I felt like I did actually excel. When CG animation came along, it was like I found my niche, because I could concentrate on the motion graphics and the acting and not worry so much about the fact that I wasn't the best drafts person in the world anymore. Whereas that, I felt anyway, had hampered me from going any further with 2D animation. And I've known others like that. Like I always talk about Dale Bear, who trained me. I was one of the people. He didn't train me personally. I mean, I worked in a studio and assimilated a lot. I mean, I knew him and was friends with him, and he showed me a lot, but it wasn't like he sat there and mentored me. But he had once said, it's like, oh, I don't mind CG animation because I don't always feel like drawing, and it frees me up to just focus on the motion and not necessarily have to worry about being able to draw that day. And I totally relate to that. So there's room. And then also too, 2D animation with rigs. So cutout animation, I know I've been promising to share that for some time now, but I haven't quite yet. That's still on the horizon, but that's another way that a person can excel in motion graphics, but not necessarily be the one who draws the characters for every single frame like we do with traditional classical style 2D animation. So there's room. If it's your passion, you'll find a way. I certainly did, if I can. I think anybody can, because I always say this, there was no business when I started. When I started at animation, there was no animation business, and I was able to get in anyway. So that taught me that if you have a passion for something, you'll find your home eventually, and not to give up, and just keep honing your talents and doing what you love and love what you do. And that's kind of my mantra, is just doing what you love and loving what you do, and then eventually you kind of find your home where you were meant to be, especially if you work hard. And that's more than anything, I think that's important. I knew somebody, I don't have too many details, but I knew somebody who approached me once and said, boy, I just don't feel like don't feel like I have it. I don't know what it is, but I just don't feel like I have the drawing abilities that I wish I had. And we had chats about it, and I'd say, well, why don't you try tracing? And a lot of the usual stuff that I always tell people. And she was like, yeah, whatever. And I watched her work, over the years, and it's like, yeah, I'm not sure she does have it. And then all of a sudden I started to see something. It was like, oh, wow, I'm starting to see her evolve. And I think it was she just kept at it and didn't give up. And as a result, was getting better, because she loved it so much, and there was never an option of, oh, I'm going to just quit and do something else. It's like, well, even if I'm a terrible drafts person, I'm still going to continue to do what I love to do. And that was evident in her drawings. It's like, wow, well, she really does love it, even though she's not initially, in my opinion, seemed to have that spark that you sometimes are looking for when you look at the work of artists. And she did it. She stepped up to it. And now I really think she's gotten really good. And I'm quite impressed with her work. And she probably could draw me under the table, as it were. I don't know. Maybe not. I'm not gonna throw myself out just yet. But very interesting to me to see somebody evolve over time, simply because they just love what they did. And I think that's a big factor in anything, is that you really love, you have a passion for it. That'll take you really, really far. I always tell people too, it's like, I've never known anybody who had to move in to a cardboard box under a bridge or anything because they were unemployed in the animation industry. I know some people who've left by choice, but as far as people who were ousted, people who really loved what they were doing seem to have been able to find their way eventually. And that gives me a lot of encouragement. And encouragement to tell people, it's like, you know what, just be stubborn, just stick to your guns and keep doing what you love, and you'll find your place, whatever that is. There have been many years where people were not able to do 2D animation, even though they loved that. And that's part of weathering the storm, I guess, is understanding that you're not always going to be able to get a high-paying job doing what you enjoy. But the people I know who stuck with the business of 2D animation, it's because there was no other option for them. They love it so much, and they're so involved in it that they can't really do anything else. And again, they didn't starve to death. They found a way to make ends meet until they could do what they loved again. I guess it's sort of like people who were wanting to be actors. It's if it was easy, everybody would do it, or could do it if they wanted to. But in the end, the only people who are able to stick with it are people who really loved it and for whom quitting was never an option ever. So anyway, there's my pep talk for the for the job of animation. And love since you're a kid. If you're ready for a career in it yet, just want to get faster. It takes a while to make 5 rough frames. Well, to classics. AM87, it took me forever to draw things when I was younger, and I remember thinking, it's like, really? That's how long it takes to do one drawing? No way am I going to be able to animate this. To someone like you, I might offer up that maybe you're doing too many drawing details. Maybe you're not drawing rough enough. At this point, well, let me finish this hand. I'll show you what the rough looked like for this particular piece of animation. And then you tell me, you know, it's like, well, is that really a nice clean drawing, or is it actually something that's really, really rough? And the idea is if you're animating, you draw really rough. You don't draw clean, because the clean drawings will take you forever. So let's just see if I can find one that's legit. Turn on the rough pass and go into this mode. So here, some award-winning rough drawings. Ha ha ha. But you know, so you can see some of these drawings are really rough. Some of them aren't even complete, like that one. Like, look at that, that's nothing. And I would see this in production. These would be rough animators drawings. When I say I would see this, I mean like the professionals, the masters, some of the master animators I've known. You know, they would have drawings like this in their scene. All that I was worried about here was the overlap and follow through on the cloak and on the bottom of the cloak, and then the placement of the hands, and then the overlap and follow through on the back of the hat. Those were the only things I was really concerned with. So I didn't need to draw it all out. It was a moving hold, except for that, except for the fact that the arm, you know, the cloak was flopping around and the base was settling, and then the back of the head was flopping around a little bit. So I didn't draw everything. And then you can see from these drawings that, you know, it's pretty rough in its own way. And there's a lot of decisions were made. Like, look at that cloak. It's all dirty and rough and scratchy. The original rough, before I put all the details on this, I don't have it anymore, so I don't know where it was. I think I probably just drew over the top of it. This was originally drawn on paper, so I started out with bouncing balls and gestures. So this, just to find a good one. So this wasn't like this until way late in the game. The original drawing of this, I wish I had it so I could show you, but the original drawing of this probably looked something like that. It's just getting my idea down as quickly and simply as possible so that I can get the timing of it down. And I'm going to probably, I don't know, maybe next week I'm going to do a scene that's all roughed out. And I'm going to just draw like this in the scene and do a real rough animation right from the start. Something I haven't done yet in these streams is just show you how raw and rough it is when it starts out. Like, that's what I was worried about. Wasn't worried about the hat or the cloak or the star on the character's head or the beard. Just trying to get the general gesture of it and get it as loose and playfully as I possibly could, and be thinking in terms of swash and stretch and gesture, and, you know, just getting my ideas down as fast as I possibly could, and then go back later and try to get some of the details and tie it down and start cleaning it up a little bit. Just so if anybody has any doubts about it, just so you know, cleanup, the thing I'm doing right now, is a whole separate discipline. And too often I see animators jump into the cleanup phase too soon. And I'm guilty of it as well. But jumping into the cleanup pass too soon, and then neglecting certain things in the animation that shouldn't have been cleaned up just yet. And in fact, this scene, I've actually done it a couple times. Like the star on the character's hat has been off, and I'll probably have to go fix it even more later. And that's just because I jumped into the cleanup phase too soon. So yeah, it's a whole discipline unto itself, cleaning the stuff up. So you should never feel bad about just doing really rough, raw animation and making it look sweet at the rough stage. It's not essential to always have a cleanup pass. You may find that your stuff looked actually better when it was in the cleanup, in the rough stage, than when it got all cleaned up and tied down. There's a real art to it, to cleaning stuff up, and it should not be taken lightly. And we're not talking about rocket science, but it's, you know, if you want your animation to sing, then the cleanup pass is really important. And so it should be given as much or maybe even more thought than you gave to your original animation in the first place. So most animators I knew, number one, didn't do their own cleanup passes. And then number two, hated cleanup with a passion, hated doing the final line pass because it just is so antithetical. Did I say that right? It's such the antithesis of animation, which is rough and loose and a lot of playing around and doing things on a real rough level before you actually commit to doing the tight stuff that looks so pretty, but it isn't necessarily. It's not really the animation phase necessarily. Again, it's I dig into trouble for saying it's like, oh, cleanup passes, it's not animation. Well, it is, but it's just a different phase of animation, and it doesn't necessarily cross over to animation in terms of that. What most animators that I know anyway do. They do the rough stuff. They do not do the clean, tight stuff. But when you're doing your own projects, you have to do everything. So there is that as a factor as well. So, and but just to answer your question, yes, I totally faced those fears before I started animating. Every time you animate something, it's like you're doing it for the very first time. Just so you know, I don't know anybody who is 100% completely masterful. I think even the greats that I've worked with, like Glenn Keane and James Baxter, would be quick to tell you that they're humbled by the work, and that every time they do it, it's brand new. And I think that's what's fun and exciting. But it also means, you know, do you ever get to that point where you can just go, oh, I'm a master now? It's like, no, not really. If the masters themselves are saying, oh, I still have so much to learn, and they've been doing it for 100 years, it's like, oh, okay, well, then the odds that I'm ever going to get to that point are probably slim and none. But I've never shot as high as trying to be a master animator. That I knew that was never going to be the case for me. I just wanted to have a fulfilling career doing this stuff. If I could, I wanted to make a living at it, and wanted to say that the projects that I worked on, you know, I was very proud of them, and that is exactly what happened. And about the time that that was not looking like it was going to be the case anymore is when I got out of the business and said, okay, you know what, I got what I wanted, and it's time for me to hand it off now and let other people have their chance. While I was taking up space, not literally, but you know, while I was working on these projects and getting paid to work on a film, I was denying somebody else a seat on the film who might have wanted it a lot more than me. And the bitter truth is that if I hadn't stepped away willingly, at some point, I don't know what phase, but at some point, it probably would have been taken away from me for sure, because that's just the way it goes. When people aren't happy, it shows, and you just aren't going to keep doing something that you don't love. One way or another, all the jobs that I've lost, well, that's not true. I mean, jobs that I've lost where, well, there really was only one. There was one job, I talk about this all the time, one studio I worked for where I ended up being invited to leave. And I always say that it was like the best thing that could have happened, because I was not happy anymore. And by inviting me to leave, they forced me to find my passion again and figure out what it was I really wanted to do, which was creature effects, it seems. And so by doing that, they helped me to find my passion again. And so by staying at the studio and not being passionate about what I was doing, I was kind of denying other people who may have been more passionate than me their opportunity to take my place. Sounds kind of cutthroat, but that's entertainment, folks. You know, that's how it works. It isn't about nurturing artists, unfortunately. I mean, that's what school is about. That's what we do at the school. is nurture people's passions and help them find their creative goals. Studios, not so much. It's more of a, it's a job, and you can't expect a place that is in the business of entertainment to coddle artists and try to help them fulfill their artistic dreams. It's like, no, you gotta kind of have to have your own artistic dreams, know what they are and know what you want to do, and be a little self-motivated there. But it doesn't mean you can't fulfill your artistic dreams while working at a studio. And like I said, I did that many times to the point where I just fulfilled everything I wanted to do and was able to step away from it and go on and do other stuff. So I would hope that everybody gets to experience that. That's one of the reasons I teach and see better, just to make me happy and say, yep, I did it. So, well, hello, Ardala, if I'm saying that right. Hey, I'm right back. And Inner Hollow, thanks for your input to understand your path a bit better. Well, I hope so. Ardala, I can't draw, you're cursed. Well, hopefully you're not cursed. But again, I was just saying earlier, there are places for people who don't like to draw. What if what if you really understand motion graphics and really like motion graphics, and you're able to animate by using a rig that's been prepared for you, a CG animation rig, either in 2D or in CG, or in 3D. What if you were able to animate a rig that way, and suddenly it turned out you're like the best motion graphics person that ever existed? There's always the possibility if you're motivated and interested in things. So just because you can't draw, you probably couldn't work for Disney as a 2D animator, but they're not doing that right now anyway. But there's always a place for everybody. So, yes, I'm a mentor at CG Spectrum, and I work in the 2D animation department, but I've also done 3D and CG. And so you hear me talking about some other disciplines as well. That's because I've done character and creature effects, and enjoy all forms of CG, animation, just motion graphics, I call it. So yeah, there's a room for everybody is what just the bottom line I think is. You just need to find what your passion is and stay true to it. And again, not listen to people when they tell you, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's like, well, maybe they can't, but you can. So if you're just joining, right now I'm doing a cleanup pass on something that I've been working on for a little while. And so I'm using the onion skin tool a lot right now to just sort of line things up and make sure that volumes and things are staying consistent as I go in and lay down a clean line on top of animation that I roughed out a long time ago. And I did something really naughty with this. Oh, it's just the worst. I never charted this, interestingly enough. And by the time I decided, oh, maybe I'll chart this for the sake of just teaching, or if anybody's curious, I just had already started doing the cleanup pass. I feel like charts are there to help for people who are going to follow you up, or if you're going to follow yourself up. And since I'd followed myself up on this a long time ago when I first built this scene, I knew exactly what this scene was about, so I didn't need to create charts for this, but you really should. You really, really should create charts always, and get good at creating charts, because if you want to be a successful animator, at some point you're going to need them. And if you don't know how to do them, it'll make your life crazy. I kind of liken it to being able to read music. It's not something that you have to be able to do to be able to play an instrument. You can play an instrument without music, but boy, does it make your life easier if you can read music a little bit, if you know a bit about music notation and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, you should chart this. Don't be like me. Don't be lazy and not chart things. There will come a time where I will look at this and I'll say, oh, wait, now is that halfway? Was it a third? Which order did I do these drawings in, and just that little short amount of time that I waste thinking about stuff like that is time I could have spent drawing instead. And it doesn't seem like much until you add it all up, and then you kind of go, oh, wow. If I just charted this, I wouldn't have to think about it at all. So just something to think about for anyone who's still getting started and is developing habits. Develop good habits that will serve you for your entire time as an animator, and you will appreciate it later. So I've got some thoughts here. Your mentor, yeah, you did that one. Glad that helps. Glad that helps. Classics AM. Bradley Bales, you got the drawing desk working today? Yes, I did. Thanks. What animation methods are you most familiar with? Well, hello there, Neon Bird. Character and creature effects, what does that mean? When you say character and creature effects, what does that mean? Well, I will answer both those questions. Classics AM 87 and Nina Bird, I guess. So I am, to answer the first question first, I'm familiar with a lot of different types of animation techniques. So when I was young, I did it all. I did stop motion, like clay and things like that. Cutouts, which is how South Park started. You know, it looks like little pieces of paper cut out and moved around on the screen, hand drawn. Then I got into doing Maya, which is CG animation using basically a puppet inside a virtual world. And then from there, I progressed into creature effects. That's basically monsters. Monsters, sci-fi creatures, anything that doesn't really exist in the real world. Although technically, I suppose you could say that face replace. So we did a lot of that in the last studio I worked at, which was an effects animation studio. And I don't know if you've seen X-Men First Class. There was a character who was made out of diamonds, and I was part of the team that we made her look like she was tied to a bed that was wrapped around her arms. I've never seen this film. I was at the time wondering, what kind of a movie is this? This has got this person who's trapped to a bed, and she's made out of diamonds, and she's struggling, and we had to make it look like the bed was holding her in place, and it was all done with CG animation effects, and that's creature effects. The tiger in Life of Pi, which I was one of the supervisors. Monsters in Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters. Whenever you have animated characters that are in the live action world, which somebody was talking about, Clifford, the big red dog, that technically, if that's what they're doing with it, that would be considered creature effects. So basically anything that is animated, but it's in the real world, and they're doing sort of like a live action animation hybrid. And this was interesting because I knew some people who had worked on Alvin and the Chipmunks, and they got let go after the production was over, and they wanted to get a job, say at Disney or something, and they went to Disney and said, hey, can you hire me as an animator? And Disney said, no, because you've only ever worked in creature effects, and we want character animators. And they said, oh, but that's not fair because, you know, this was character animation. Alvin and the Chipmunks is very stylized, bouncy, over the top, classic style character animation. But the studios were kind of saying, no, it's creature effects because you mix stuff with live action backgrounds. But that was very interesting. Well, here's the bottom line. People who were really talented, they got hired anyway. I thought that was interesting. I heard a lot of people complain, oh, I can't get into Disney because I only have creature effects on my reel. And then I found out the people who had creature effects on their reel were getting hired at Disney anyway. So that kind of changed that. But yeah, so creature effects, basically, if you've seen Star Wars films and there were, I don't know, creatures in that, I don't mean the originals, I mean like, when I say originals, like 70s and 80s Star Wars, I mean like the recent Star Wars films. If you saw monsters, I don't know, spaceships, or even in some cases stunt people jumping around on the screen, what you were really probably looking at was digital animation. And it isn't character animation, which is based in, it's really kind of hard to, it's a really good question, but if you've seen The Croods, for example, or Trolls, or any number of Disney film, Frozen, Tangled, I mean, everybody saw them twice, apparently. That's traditional character animation, and not the kind of creature effects stuff that qualifies as creature effects animation. So for it to be creature, I don't know what the exact distinction is, but I'm pretty sure what they mean is it's in a live action environment, and it is meant to look realistic. So for example, the new Lion King, the most recent one, not new, it's not new anymore, but the most recent Lion King was probably more, that's a creature effects film more than it is like the Secret Life of Pets or something, which is all character, or Addams Family or whatever. Those are character animation films. The ones where it looks like it's a live action world, those are creature effects mostly. But it's getting to be a more and more gray area. Like, for example, if a car commercial uses an animated car, like, and you can't tell that it's animated, is it still an animated commercial? Well, yeah, because it was created using traditional animation techniques, even if all it did was the car just drove from one side of the screen to the other. And you couldn't tell it was an animated car, but technically speaking, it was still animation. It wasn't a real car at that point. So, was that creature effects? There was no creature involved in that car. I don't know. At that point, I wouldn't even know what to tell you. But when I worked in creature effects, we could do anything from spaceships and cars to monsters and robots to replacing a stunt person. I always talk about this film with Tom Cruise we did, and we replaced the stunt person's face with Tom Cruise's face digitally, and then had his motorcycle spin around. I didn't do that one, but I was there when it was being done. I worked on the film, just not on that. And those were, creature effects. And then we also worked on Hop, which was a cutesy kind of cartoon movie. And they said that too is creature effects. That's, so it's kind of a gray area now and then. But that's my definition. I'm sticking to it right now. So character, more of the cartoony stuff, and then creature, more of the realistic live action stuff. All right, so continuing on here. Looks like I got some pretty extreme drawings here. Let's see if I want to do these now or just save them for later. I kind of like to do the more extreme stuff off camera because it's kind of hard to concentrate while you're talking. And if some serious decisions need to be made about the animation, then I want to put some thought into it. So I'll probably focus a little more on these slow out in betweens for a little bit. And that way I can talk to you more freely without losing my marbles. So this is a slow out. That's one of the 12 principles of animation, right? I can already see I'm going to have problems with the beard. Let me fix that up before I even go one step further. So I'll demonstrate a slow out. Not like it needs to be demonstrated, but I will just show that I'm doing this slow out on this character, making the character slowly come to a stop, but trying to make it so that not everything comes to a stop at the same time. It's really important in animation that you don't have everything come rigidly to a stop at the same time. There are certain specific styles like anime and other styles, limited animation that you see in TV shows and the like, where it's not such a big deal. But for the most part, we want to make sure nothing comes to a complete dead halt at the same time, because then it just doesn't make it look as organic. And having this conversation a lot with people, speaking of animation and animation stuff, is, do we still need the over-the-top acting styles that were so popular in the classic Disney eras? Or are we starting to kind of move away from that style, which is based in theater, based in vaudeville even, which is all stuff that was popular when the Disney films were younger and new, where the acting was a little bit more over the top. And one of the reasons the studios claimed, at least, for getting rid of 2D as a medium in the early 2000s was they said, well, CG animation's more subtle. You can do more subtle acting. It's more stable. It's not as limiting. And we all just balked and laughed at that and said, well, yeah, I guess you haven't seen something like Bambi recently and watched a little kid cry over all the subtle animation in that. But point well taken. But what I think they were more thinking about is that, yeah, maybe 2D animation is a little bit mired, or can be a little bit mired in acting styles that have gotten old-fashioned, and maybe it was time or is time or whatever to step it up and think about, well, does animation in the 2D world, does it need to be as exaggerated as it's often been in styles that were popularized as early as the 40s and 50s, with a style of acting that isn't really seen anymore. People don't act like they used to in 40s and 50s movies, and a lot of people haven't even seen 40s and 50s movies. And so that style of acting seems very alien to them. And I know this because I've had students say it to me. They say, well, yeah, I don't get that kind of acting. It just seems really weird to me, and I don't want to do that in my own work. I want to actually do something a little more subtle. And I say, here, it's I get very uneasy with the idea that there are these locked-in rules, because once something's locked in, then it doesn't change anymore. Then it ceases to evolve, and it ceases to be popular. And at the risk of offending any of my peers who might be listening to any of this, me going on and on, is that's one of the reasons I think that the 2D stuff did go away, is people got kind of tired of it. They'd seen it, it'd been done and done. And there are people who always love it no matter what and support it, and I'm one of them. But you do have to kind of think about generations that come afterwards and who are interested in something vital and fresh that they've not seen before. And maybe that's one of the reasons why anime took off so much, is because it was new and fresh and different. Whether it has more quality or not, I'm not here to debate. But it was just a new, fresh take on something that maybe had been done to death. I don't know. So again, I don't think that means that anything has to go away, but I'm talking purely in terms of the business of animation. It's like, well, it costs a lot of money to make a cartoon, and why don't they spend money to make cartoons? Well, because nobody's paying to see those cartoons, and if they did, then they'd make more of them. That's how the big 90s boom happened in the first place. So maybe somebody needs to come up with a style that's very fresh, and I think that's happening right now with like Netflix and other locales, where they're invigorating it with new life for younger audiences, not younger as kids, but for people who are excited about animation. They're making it exciting for them and giving them something that's very much of their time. And maybe, again, I risk offending people, but maybe not so much about hearkening back to a style that's been done a lot, and there are a lot of examples of it, and it's something that maybe needs to evolve a little bit. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the subject. And again, I expect to be roundly drubbed for my outrageous heretical thoughts against the classic 2D animation style, which I love. So anyway, this now I'm going to do is slow out, which means that I started here on frame 59, and I'm going to take it all the way to probably 78, 59, I'll say 79, so 59 to 79, that's like 20 drawings, and I'm just going to cut it in half and just keep cutting it in half until there's no more to trace back. So I'm not actually going to number these, but it would probably, 61, 63, 65, 67. I got my smoothing turned way up so you can't see the numbers. 67, 69, 71, 73, so I just keep going until it's actually not moving anymore. Just keep tracing, tracing, tracing. Each one of these is going to be a half. So I'm just going to do that to fill up the rest of the time until I get sick of it. I feel like doing something else. Anyway, so I'm going to create a slow out for the wizard right now. Meanwhile, Classics AM, where do you find inspiration for your animation? Well, wow, thank you. Thanks for that. So where do I find, that was from Classics AM, thank you. So where do I find inspiration? Well, that's a really good question. I think that inspiration can come from anywhere. And I think that as an artist, you know, if you ever watched other artists and they get asked, well, where does your inspiration come from? Where do your ideas come from? That's another one that comes up a lot. And the honest truth is nobody really knows. Nobody knows what inspires us to do these things. I think in my case, inspiration for my work always comes from it doesn't exist already. So take this scene, for example. Again, I created this many years ago when I was in the thick of things. And my goal back then was there was this film called Wizards. I've shown the inspiration, you know, for the character design. There was a film called Wizards, and while I loved that film, I never got to work on it because I was a little kid when it came out. And so I thought, ooh, it'd be fun if I got to work on that film. And so I said, well, why don't I just create my own version of an action using that character? And that led me to deciding to do an animation scene with this character. And so it was just something as simple as that was the inspiration, and that's all it took. So other times I was doing things because I wanted to impress somebody. So I thought, ooh, this will be a good scene to do to help me get a job. You know, if I do this specific action or this specific whatever, then that will guarantee me, you know, like dumb things like, oh, I got to do a walk cycle, or I got to do an action scene, you know, or I want to do something that looks very much like what you'd see in a Disney film because I'm trying to get a job at Disney. So, you know, things like that can be considerations along with everything else. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm doing stuff that's the stuff I'm interested in. You have to be really into animation to want to sit here for hours and hours and hours and complete a scene. And so that can be a motivating factor as well. And just get rid of this. Thank you. So things that inspire me the most in my animation choices is stuff that I've already seen, stuff that I'm already familiar with, and I want to do more of it. But it basically comes down to stuff that doesn't exist in the world already. I'm looking for things that don't exist so I can create them. Toon Boom's giving me grief tonight. It does that periodically. I'm just going to go ahead and trace these feet off instead of copying and pasting them. Yeah, so in the same way that some people are like, ooh, I just heard this song and I want to make a music. Yeah, it's giving me grief. All right, I'm going to shut this down and open it up again. And sometimes you can hear a song and then you think, oh, wow, I would like to make a music video out of that song because that song really inspires me. And that is your inspiration. That's all. It didn't exist, and so you had to create it. And that's what I do with the books I've written and the films I've made, and you know, any sort of art I've made. It's because it doesn't exist already, and then it's influenced by all the things that I've been exposed to in my time. And I've talked about that in the past, where like Mad Magazine. I would look at the drawings and I'd think, oh wow, it'd be really cool if that was animated. And so I decided to try and animate it myself. And that was a bat scene I think I did last week. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this character in the style of Bollywood, kind of, or so. For example, this one, as I said, in the style of Ralph Bakshi cartoon that I liked a lot. Well, and Mickey Mouse too. I always thought that Mickey Mouse and Fantasia was really fun. So anyway, so those are some of the things that inspire me personally. I'd be curious to know if anybody out there, what inspires you, where you get your inspiration from. What is it that makes you drop everything and just start working on a project? Because it is an interesting question. Those of us who are artistic in nature, artistically inclined, rather, you have to be a little bit nuts, I think, to want to be, well, not to want to. I never wanted to be an artist, just between you guys and me. And people have said that to me in the past. It's like they have this idea that an artist is this idyllic thing where you're sitting out in a garden somewhere and you're painting. To me, art is struggle. Art is, the creativity is, I've got a problem and I don't know how to solve it. I've got this idea in my head and I want to make it real because it doesn't exist already. How do I get it out there? Do I draw it, paint it, animate it, write it, play it, music? Is it a movie? Is it a show? Is it drawing? It doesn't exist, and so I have to create it. Well, how do I do that? And it can be as simple as that. It's like, well, I have to have the skills to be able to do these things. So I often forget to mention too that I enjoy it. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to do this stuff, and I often caution my students. It's like, if you're not having fun, if you don't feel like dropping everything and working on your art, then you may, either the project's not right, or you may not be an artist with that particular medium. So like my 2D animation students, some of you have already said, it's like, oh, well, I don't really like to draw that much. If you've signed on to do 2D animation in the traditional sense, and you don't like to draw, then you may find that that's not what you were meant to do, but there's probably something else that you were meant to do, and so you just need to get on with finding it. But to me, art is struggle. I can't rest until I've put this out into the world in some form or another. And then something as silly as this wizard, the honest truth is that I come up with stuff to work on every week, in hopes that somebody might find it interesting to watch me work on this stuff, and along the way I can give tips and tricks to anybody who's got a passion for this stuff. But the real truth is I originally animated this wizard because I just had this idea and I knew I wouldn't rest until I actually did it, and so I set about doing it and trying it, and then when I first did it, it was mildly successful, and so I revisited it many years later because I'm still not done. And so little obsession doesn't hurt. People who are obsessed, I think, make good artists. They make crazy people. You may make yourself crazy because you just can't rest until your project is done or whatever. But I think that that's part of what being an artist is. And for better or worse, if you find yourself in that situation, welcome to the club. You're not alone. Think of some of the famous artists of old, like Van Gogh, and people who were not necessarily the most stable or sane people in the world. I've known a lot of animators who were not necessarily the most stable or sane people in the world. But there's a place for everyone. And what's fun about being in the animation community is you look around, you realize that you're amongst friends. People go, I understand. Yes, I used to stay up until 4 in the morning every night myself working on whatever. Anyway, that's some of my inspiration. Another lecture. Okay, so inspiration for drawing. You want a cool desktop wallpaper, or you're going to make something normal looking more interesting with exaggeration. I'll hold off on that one. What was it like working on Pocahontas? That's an easy one. So I'll talk about, well, here, let me think about this. Inspiration for drawing. You want a cool desktop wallpaper for animation. Can you make something normal looking more interesting with exaggeration? Well, to that, so this is basically directed to Bradley Badles. To that, I would say, just keep doing it. That's the simple answer, is if you like something and you want to get fulfillment in it as an artist, Really, the secret is just keep doing it. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. No one ever hands you an award and says, "Oh, you're a master now," or "You're a genius now." What usually happens, and I don't know if anyone ever says, "Oh, you're a genius," but what usually happens is you stick around for long enough, people start to kind of go, "Oh, wow, you got something not everybody has," and at that point, then you begin to get an assessment. People say, "Well, I really want what you have," and you say, "Well, you got to pay for it," and they say, "Okay, well, we will," or they say, "Oh, no, no way." I mean, it's the same like if you ever tried to sell your art on ArtStation or something. And if people are willing to buy it, you begin to realize that you've got something that is marketable. And again, it's not all about money. It's not all about financial stuff. You can be very fulfilled as an artist in your own work. But for the rest of us, if you're looking for proof of, well, am I better now? Have I gotten better? Odds are it's because there's been some exchange. People want your work. I think of people like Ryden, the painter, Mark Ryden, whose stuff is just gold. Or what's the other one? Shag, who I remember years ago, my office mate went to an auction to try and get a Shag painting, even the smallest like thumbnail sketch, and just couldn't. There were so many people were bidding on Shag's work that there was no way that he could get even the smallest of works from that artist. And that certainly revealed that Shag had made it and was considered a modern day master, or whatever you want to call him. Certainly lucrative painter, which is not something that's that easy to do. So, but you just got to keep doing what you love and love what you do. I don't know that Shag ever set out to be the prolific artist that he is. I think it happened, and I'm sure he would have wanted it to, and he's real glad it did. But I don't know if that. I think he probably would have just kept painting anyway. The same with Ryden. There's just a couple of examples of artists that I'm aware of that were very successful. Nina Birdnice, this type of crazy is normal. Oh, you betcha. It's one of the most wonderful things about the animation community is that finally you look around. Well, some people look around and go, "Oh, I'm home. I'm here." These are the people who understand. They get me, and they enjoy talking about the things I like. For example, I remember at Disney, people would have just stacks and stacks of Disney consumer products. I don't know, Disney Anna, whatever you want to call it. They'd have their desks just loaded up with that stuff, and people who are middle-aged or slightly younger than that, and they've got all these toys on their desk, and it's like it's more normal to have that than if you didn't. People would say, "Well, why don't you have all that stuff on your desk?" A person who's 33 years old, or 35 or 45 or 55, it's like, "What do you mean you don't have Disney stuff on your desk? Everybody does here. That's kind of how we roll." And I like that. I think that's cool that everybody has. You just have to find your niche and figure out where you belong, and then once you get there, you'll be amazed to find out that it's like, oh, finally, after years of thinking that I was the only one, now I'm surrounded by people who think the way I do and kind of view the world the way I do, and it can be really cool. It can also be like if you're used to being a big fish in a little pond, if you're the resident artist, it can be very humbling to find out, that there are other people who do the same thing you do and maybe do it better. But as long as you look at that as an opportunity to learn and grow and don't take it personally, then you'll be just fine. So the question that I got from Classics AM87 was, what was it like working on Pocahontas? Well, the truth is I only worked on it for the last 8 weeks of production, but while I was there, it was one of the most important projects I'd ever worked on. It was one of the most memorable times I've ever had. So it was 8 weeks, but it ended up being a really valuable 8 weeks because of things like getting to work with Glenn Keane and getting to work with the people who would, other animators on the film, and just the integrity. I'd never been on a film before that had so much thought put into it and so much care and love, and people really took it seriously. And when it was over, there was this sense of, wow, that's going to be a hard one to follow, because people just put their souls into that film. I'd never experienced that before. I'd worked on films that were very sincere, and we really believed in the films, but there was always this remove. It's like, well, they weren't really well, no, that's, yeah. So it just, I don't know what the difference was, but on Pocahontas, it was just such a serious film, and so much was riding on it, and a lot of money went into it. And there was just a sense of it that this was going to be a really special project. And so by the time I got on the film, all that was already in place, and I got sunk into it really quickly and felt this reverence for it. And I was very excited to see the screening. We had a big, huge, splashy party down at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. I think it was at Dorothy Chandler screening where they used to have the Oscars. And it was a big, huge party, and there was just this sense of camaraderie. And even for somebody like me who had only been on the film for 8 weeks during the film, there was a sense that we were all in it together, and we were all working as a body to create this thing that would hopefully, we hoped, and I think time has proven us right, that it would be something that would last. And I talk to people all the time, and they still talk about that film and suggest that it still matters, that it's still relevant, or at least recognizable. You know, whatever you feel about the politics. I always have to say this, that I was studying for fun. I used to go to Oxford in the summers on an exchange program, for fun, and do a little 3-week visit to Oxford through California, through UC Berkeley. They did this thing. It was a vacation, but it sounds really impressive to say that I went and studied King Arthur at Oxford College, Worcester College, Oxford. And the provost of Worcester College, Oxford, was really intrigued when he found out that I worked for Disney, which I did at the time. And that happened everywhere I went. People would be like, ooh, Disney, it opens doors. People recognize it. And so he was interested in hearing about it. And he said to me at one point, he just goes, my dear boy, I was wondering if perhaps you could go back to the studio and tell them to go back to doing singing mice and rats and things and leave American history alone. And he's like, don't do any more films about indigenous people and turning it into musicals and such not. And it was the first time it ever really occurred to me, and that's just, I guess, the sheltered kind of person I was once, that it never really occurred to me that they were perhaps doing a disservice to the legend of Pocahontas and indigenous people by making this film. And the honest truth is, they were really, really determined to be respectful. They tried really hard to make it, when you consider it was made in, 1995, and there was not nearly the outcry PC that there is nowadays, where nowadays it's like, they will say, it's like, why don't you just not make a film about that subject and let people who are more qualified, who are embedded in that culture, make the film and do it in a way that they feel is respectful, and just stick to stuff that's not quite as a hot topic as Native Americans, indigenous people, whatever. Even now, it's like I try very hard to be PC, and I don't always have the correct verbiage. But we certainly didn't back then, and people objected to the way that they distorted the story and the way that they designed the character to look a lot more adult, shall we say, than she actually supposedly was. And so, I have mixed feelings about it. I've worked on films that have gotten flack. Another one was Dorado. But it's sort of like, well, but they did bring up the topic and got people talking about it, and that was about as far as we could go back then. Things have changed a lot since then, and that's great. But at the time, the mere fact that they employed a lot of Native Americans, indigenous people, that they employed a lot of them to do the voice work, that they consulted them on habits and practices of the people, for the time, that was pretty good. It's about as good as you could hope for a project like that. The fact that they took it on because they wanted to say something about that culture, and they've done that with other films as well, like Mulan, Moana, Lilo and Stitch even. I was there. They were trying really hard to be respectful and to raise awareness about cultures that weren't represented in that medium. So, okay, they didn't do it quite right, you know, especially by today's standards, but at least they tried, which is more than they had to. They could have just kept making The Lion King over and over again, which even that has its, you know, representation in some ways. There's some cultural representation there. You know, so they didn't have to. They could have just kept cranking out Mickey Mouse cartoons, and some people think they should have. I'm ambivalent. I'm not even going to comment on it, but the issue itself just rises as a result of talking about Pocahontas, and part of it was, even at the time, making a film that's embedded in a culture like that, and how do you do it respectively? Should you do it at all? Did they do it? And what were the results of them doing it? But the experience of working on it itself, aside from the fact that it was my first tour of duty at Disney, well, it was my first film at Disney, and I was the new kid on the block, and had to make my way after having been very well established. By that time, even though I was still really new in the business, I wasn't even halfway through my career yet, but I'd already made like 4 or 5 films. Not made them, I'd worked on them, and had attained a measure of status as a final line cleanup person, and was kind of taking a step back to work on that film. But I didn't think I was going to last any longer than 8 weeks. There were so many things going on at that time in 2D animation. I could kind of write my own ticket, and thought, well, you know, it won't hurt to have this on my resume for now, to have Disney on there. And I didn't even have to apply for the job. I had applied to Disney before. I tell this story all the time. I'd applied to Disney before, but didn't get in. They said, we like your stuff, but we just don't have any openings. We don't need anybody right now. By the time Pocahontas rolled around, I was working at another studio. A person that I was friends with said, hey, I'm compiling names. We're all going to go to Disney. Would you like to go too? They need people, and I'm going back there. I used to work there. And if you'd like to go, I'll take you with me. I'm compiling names of people I think are good. Would you like to go? This taught me several things. Be nice to everybody, be open to everything, and don't give up just because somebody doesn't say yes on your first day out. You know, Disney had never said yes to me before, but now I was hired and I didn't have to even apply for the job. And so when I got there, I was maybe a little bit haughty, for want of a better word. Not a haughty, but just a little bit full of myself, maybe, because there was so much going on, and I had offers, and I felt, you know, I didn't have to settle. So I said, yeah, well, I'll do it for 8 weeks, but I had to take a step back, a couple rungs in both title and pay. So I was like, but I'm not going to stay here, not when so many things are happening in the business. And then when I went to negotiate after Pocahontas was over, it's kind of a landmark deal where I negotiated a really sweet deal for myself and just basically said, if you don't give me what I want, I'm going to walk, because I don't need to do this. I need to take care of myself. And that was a first, well, not a first for Disney, but it was a first for me, where I was like, I can't stay at this job and keep doing this when I know I could get a job elsewhere and continue to evolve as an artist. And here I'll just be another body, another face in the crowd. And they gave me everything I wanted, and I stayed. I ended up leaving 2 years later because I just really didn't feel like I was going to excel there. So I went to DreamWorks, and I did excel there and was very happy for a long time. And so it was the right move. But a lot of people I know stayed at Disney and were really happy there too. So I think it's just, you just go where you're meant to be eventually. But as far as the experience, I've said already, you know, I thought it was a really sincere project. A lot of love went into it, a lot of great animators, some of whom are no longer with us, which is really sad for various reasons. But the experience itself kind of filled me with reverence. And then just being at Disney, I mean, if you are into Disney at all, being surrounded by the legacy of it all, the history of the place, that just, you can just feel it in the very walls. Even in the new building, which is, we moved into that building that's off of the 101 freeway on in Burbank, Glendale, Burbank, yeah. Excuse me. Just even that, even though there was a new building built just for us, there was just, it's like, wow, we're kind of making history here as we speak. And I do think we did make history. Those films, you'll not see their like again. They're not making them now, and if they do, they'll make them in a different way. And so to have been there when it was all still right in the middle of things, was a very exciting thing. And I remember, I've told this story before too, but when I was thinking of leaving after Pocahontas, and one of the animation people there, she said, "Hey, why don't you take a little tour with me of the new building?" Because we were in Glendale, and they called it the Hat Building. You can look it up online. It was being built in Burbank. They said, "Well, why don't you come take a look at the pre-production artwork for Hercules? I think you're going to see that it's just beautiful. You're going to just love it, and you're going to want to stay." I don't know why she wanted me to stay. I don't know, a variety of reasons, but maybe because having artists who were talented there made life easier for people who were supervisors to have them work for them. I don't know. But she showed me the artwork for Hercules, and I was just thrilled. I couldn't believe it. It was like, wow, this is the kind of film I've always wanted to work on. It's just all the right elements from an artistic standpoint. And so I ended up staying for Hercules, but I had to get through Hunchback first. And Hunchback was not something I really would have felt strongly about. I did not want to work on it, but it was a real life-changing experience in its own way. And it's one of the few films I can still watch regularly that I worked on. Most of them I'm like, been there, done that. But I still watch Hunchback every now and then, and just am in awe that it got made at all, let alone that it got made with all that love and attention and money and detail. So yeah, so it was, I really value my time spent at Disney, even though it was a relationship that didn't ultimately work out. And I ended up fleeing to go to DreamWorks, where I felt much more at home. But the time that I spent there was really exciting and important. And, it was more money than I'd ever had in my life. You talk about not having to worry about a thing. You're just like, oh yeah, let's go out to dinner every day. And then there'd be big, huge wrap parties at the end of the films, and they give away all these gifts and bonuses. And most people I know, well, not most, but a lot of people I know made quite a bit more money than I did even. And it didn't make me rich, but it was certainly more money than I'd ever seen at that point in my life. I was still in my 20s, and that was a lot then. But that's not really what I did it for, oddly enough. Maybe that's silly, but I was in it for the love of the business as much as I was for the compensation. It was just nice to be able to be paid well for something that you love to do that was successful. And that's the other thing too, is Pocahontas was the first film I worked on that was actually successful. The other ones I had worked on were not hits, and in fact they were, I don't know, they weren't, well, I don't know. Was this Swan Princess a flop? I don't know. Yeah, technically it was. And it shut us down. But then they made like 27 sequels. They're still going. So you can't say that it was ultimately unsuccessful. But at the time it came out, it was not. And the other films I worked on were not either. Rover Dangerfield and the original Tom and Jerry movie. They had released it in Europe, in France, I think. And it did really well there, so they thought, oh, we'll do a release in the States, and it didn't do anything in the States. Probably went to direct-to-video. So to work on a film that was successful was really interesting, Pocahontas. Now, it wasn't as successful as Lion King, but it was still a big hit, and you could just feel it in the air. It's like, yep, we won this one. That was new to me. And then, obviously, with each successive film, they kind of started to lose more and more traction, but I got out of there by that time. The films that I worked on at DreamWorks, the 2D animated films, they were not hits, and so I was used to it by then. Every week we'd come in after one of the films premiered, and we'd go, is this it? We're gonna get laid off? Is this the end? But Mr. Katzenberg was good at keeping the place afloat. And then I switched over to doing creature effects, and it really didn't matter whether our films were successful because we weren't responsible for them. And that was both freeing and, no, it was mostly freeing. Until Life of Pi, which was a film I took very personally and put a lot of personal love and time and energy into. And I was greatly excited that that one got a lot of rewards. We put a lot of love into it. The environment on that film was like no other I've ever worked on, where it was just relaxed and easy and just new inventions. Every corner we turned, we were doing something new and different, and then it paid off in a successful film that was given a lot of accolades. And the fact that that the studio went down after that, it doesn't really affect the film itself. That was something else entirely. The film itself was a success, and I thought, what a great time for me to kind of step out of the ring and do something else now that I've attained all the goals I ever wanted to. So, yeah. Oh, I'm glad you liked that one. Glad that you liked that one. Yeah, Life of Pi was a real thrill to work on, and I really felt happy that I got to be a part of that, because you don't get films like that all the time. You can sometimes get films that you're not that proud of, and you will feel it in the air when you're working on a film like that. You'll feel that it's like, okay, this one's not going to be the best thing we ever worked on. But I've always given everything I had to every film I ever worked on, no matter how big or small. And I don't know, probably I really shouldn't do this, but probably the smallest one was Yogi Bear, the movie. And I'm like, hey, you know what? It's still a film. They're still spending a lot of money on it. And the artists themselves, we put a lot of love into it, despite all. And it wasn't the film's fault. It wasn't anybody's fault. It was a job, and we took it. But that was a rarity where I'm like, okay, I'm on a film I'm not really 100% on board with, but it's work, and I got to take it because it's work. It's like I just really hadn't had to do that a lot in my career. Either I was spoiled or just naive or something, but every single film I'd worked on up until that point was like, oh, I'm very excited about this. And that was the first time I'm like, I'm really not excited about this. And the thing that got me out of it was to look around and see all the burgeoning artists around me who were excited about it. And it was an opportunity for them to work their skills and try, animation evolution, evolve their skills a little bit. And I thought, come on, get with the program. You're working in Hollywood and feature films and working on a 3D movie. And that was kind of what did it for me, was that I got excited about the fact that it was my first 3D film, was Yogi Bear. And then Life of Pi was the next one. And so, but that was the first inklings I had of, maybe I'm not as excited about all this as I used to be. And maybe it's time for me to start thinking about what I can do to get excited about stuff again. But other than that, every film I'd ever worked on was something that I stand behind and meant a lot to me. Whether the film was top drawer or not, whether it was an A film or not, it didn't matter to me at the time. It was the amount of love that went into the making of the film that I thought mattered. And most of them, a lot of love went into them because I was there. We worked on them. I remember that a lot of love went on into them. So there, I'm going to play this. Got about 9 minutes left to today's stream. If there's any final thoughts anybody has to offer. I'm not sure I made a lot of headway with this thing. So I've been talking about this in a class just today. It's like animation takes a long time. It really does. And you have to have patience to be able to animate. And you can't expect things to happen quickly. And you shouldn't want them to necessarily happen quickly. If they're happening quickly, it's because if you're feeling impatient, it's because maybe you're not enjoying the process enough. And so, you should take a step back and enjoy the process of creating this stuff. So this is what it looked like in the rough form. It'll look a little bit more smooth when it's cleaned up. And then I'm also going to add a background, and I'm going to add maybe some little effectsy stuff like poofs of smoke or light or something. I haven't quite worked that out yet. Kind of doing this on the fly, which is not a good idea in 2D animation. Everything should be thought out carefully and planned, and I'm just having fun, which I think is important. You should have some fun every now and then, just play. And so that's kind of what I do with these streams. Well, thank you, Classics AM 87. Thanks for saying so. Hopefully, by the time it's done, it's going to be all colored and rendered and lit and rendered. But oops, got a little error there. So hopefully, by the time it's done, it's going to look really nice. But that's where we're at with it for now. Like I said, do you need to do a full cleanup pass? I don't know. We were talking about this in class just today, some of us, and talking about, well, sometimes it's better to just have a rough animation pass. That might actually be your best bet. You may not need to take everything to the final line phase. You may find that you can just do a really nice rough pass, and then that's enough. And then other times, you really want to make sure that you have a really beautiful cleaned up line. But they're two different things. They're two different disciplines, and you should never feel bad if you find that you're more interested in the one than the other. It's like, be true to what it is that you love to do, and just keep doing that. And eventually, you'll find yourself in the home where you belonged, doing what it is you love to do the most. The one thing that you can't do is fake things, and you shouldn't try. And I say that all the time about schmoozing and networking is really, really, really don't try to fake your way into things as far as making friends in the industry or trying to make contacts, because people can see you a mile away. If anybody's got any experience at all, then they will see somebody coming who's a fake and will encourage them to get lost. Be sincere. You'll find your way, and be patient, because good things come to those who wait. That's not a cliche at that point. It's just the truth. Good things come when you are patient and when you take your time and do things through the proper channels. And by contrast, when you rush through things and try to get everything all at once, you'll often find that you don't get to hold on to whatever success you do get. And you want to not just get success, but you want to be able to keep it. And so the best way I've found to do that is just be real honest and real true to your, keep your integrity intact. Sometimes it just seems like things don't happen fast enough, and you can get real impatient and go, well, I want what I want now. And if I cheat, or if I jump a few steps ahead, that maybe that'll get me to where I want to go. And it's like, no, do it the right way. Go the long way around, and you'll see. Odds are you're going to be around for a really long time. You might as well enjoy the ride and not just race to get somewhere just for the sake of racing. All right. I'm going to fix that up later. I'm going to save this and wrap this up for today. Again, I'll just play it a few times more. But anyway, it's been, as usual, it's been a lot of fun hanging out with y'all today or tonight, or wherever it is you happen to be. This is, again, my wizard animation stuff that was based on Avatar. There's a Ralph Bakshi character from Wizards. It's actually based on another character called Cheech Wizard by, I think his name is Juan Baudet. And then mixing in a little bit of Mickey from Fantasia with all the floppy cloak and the floppy hat and stuff. And then just basically doing it my way based on animation I'd started years ago, but then recently roughed out. And so that's the rough pass. And now I'm cleaning it up, and we'll probably have this finished by next time. So if you tune in next time, you can see how it turned out, or at least see where it's at that stage. And then coming up, I'm going to start up another scene, another rough scene, potentially for next week, and I'll be joined. I'll get my friend here. I'll be joined by a new friend next week, new surprise visitor who will be joining me in this where this position is usually occupied. We'll put this guy away for a little bit, and then invite another friend to join us, another theme, and then I'm probably going to have a different background next week too. Ooh, I know that's what everybody turns into, to see if I have a different background. But yeah, tune in next time if you would like to see what's going on. Again, it's been great having you here. Thanks for all the cool conversation. I enjoyed as much, hopefully, as you guys do, or maybe even more. Check out CG Spectrum. If you're interested in more of these streams, there are plenty of them on different topics for you to check out. There's also the classes for you to check out, cgspectrum.com. We'd love to hear from you. Just send them an email if you're interested in the school at all. And like I said, it's wonderful seeing some new faces. And I'd love to see some of you come back again next time and tell me how it's going. And obviously, like I always say this, come back with any thoughts or questions that you might have, or if you have any suggestions, anything you'd like to see for next time, please feel free to enter it into the chat. I'll leave the chat up for a minute or so after I disappear from here. So if you want to offer any requests or anything, again, just keep it civil, keep it nice, or we zap you. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time, and have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your evening, rest of the week, a holiday if you're going to have one this week. And thanks for sharing this time with me. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.